I found my face in a stranger's childhood photos. I was scrolling through a local history Facebook group late one night, half bored and half looking for something interesting to distract me from work. Most of the posts were harmless, grainy photos of old buildings, vintage advertisements, people's grandparents in black and white. Then one post caught my attention. It was a scan page from an old family album someone had found at a thrift store. In the center of the image was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with messy hair and a red dress. Her smile was shy, almost forced. It took me several seconds to realize why my stomach dropped, because the girl wasn't just familiar. She was me. The exact shape of my eyes, the mole near my left eyebrow, even a faint scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike at 7. But the photo was supposedly from 1992. I was born in 1998. I stared at the screen for so long my eyes burned. My brain kept trying to find logical explanations. Maybe it was someone who just looked a lot like me. Maybe the scar was just a coincidence. But then I saw the caption under the photo. It listed the little girl's name, Emily Carson. I had never heard of that name before, yet it felt disturbingly familiar, like a word you can't place but have heard in a dream. The comments under the post were casual, people speculating about the family, joking about how cute Emily was. I was the only one feeling like the floor had just dropped out beneath me. I clicked on the uploader's profile and messaged her. She replied within minutes, saying she'd found the album in a box labeled Estate Sale, Carson Family, and that most of the pictures seemed to be from the early 90s. She even sent me a few more images from the album. In one of them, Emily was sitting on a swing next to a man whose face was blurred from motion, but the blur didn't hide the strange, almost predatory way he was looking at her. The pit of my stomach grew heavier, because behind them, barely visible, was a house I recognized. It was the house I live in now. The moment I recognized the house, my skin prickled. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. The same faded blue siding, the same porch railing with one missing spindle, the same crooked mailbox leaning toward the road. I got up from my desk and looked out my own front window as if I needed to confirm it was still there. The sight felt suddenly wrong, like my home had been keeping something from me all this time. I messaged the woman again, asking if she knew the address from the album. She didn't, but she offered to send me scans of the entire thing. I told her yes, and within 10 minutes my inbox was full of images. Photo after photo showed Emily, me, growing from a toddler into a young girl. Birthday cakes, park picnics, trips to the fair. But the man was in almost every shot. Sometimes smiling warmly, sometimes blurred, sometimes standing just a little too close. There was no sign of mother in any of them. Then came the photos that made my blood run cold. One was taken from the bottom of my basement stairs. Emily stood halfway down, holding a stuffed bear, staring directly into the camera. Her eyes looked different, flat, lifeless. Behind her on the concrete wall was a set of deep scratches. I recognized them because I'd noticed them the first week I moved in, thinking they were just wear and tear. Another photo showed the upstairs hallway at night. The door to my bedroom was slightly open, a shadow visible through the crack. In the corner of the image, a date was written in pen, October 14th, 1992. Something twisted in my gut when I realized October 14th is my birthday. I flipped through the rest with shaking hands until I reached the final image. Emily was gone. The man was standing alone in my backyard at dusk, holding the stuffed bear by the leg. His face wasn't blurred this time, and I knew it. It was the face of the man who used to live across the street when I was a child. The man my mom always told me to stay away from. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house felt amplified. Every shadow stretched too far. I couldn't stop picturing his face, the way his jawline sloped downward, the thin lips that never seemed to smile properly, the small, deep-set eyes that always looked like they were studying you. I remembered little flashes from my childhood. Summers when I was maybe 7 or 8, playing outside in our old neighborhood. He'd be across the street, standing on his porch, smoking. He'd wave sometimes, a slow, lazy motion that seemed almost rehearsed. My mom would appear instantly, her hand clamping around my shoulder, pulling me inside without a word. I thought she was just overprotective. Now I realized she might have been trying to keep me alive. The next morning, I searched for his name. I found it easily. Obituaries have a way of freezing people in time. He died in 2013. The article was short, almost dismissive, but it mentioned no surviving family. But there was one link in the related articles that made my blood run cold. Local man questioned in 1992 missing child case. I clicked. There she was, Emily Carson. My face, my scar, my eyes, missing at age 6. Last seen near her home, wearing a red dress. The man, his name was Robert Heller, had been the primary suspect. They never found enough evidence to charge him. I sat frozen in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. If Emily had gone missing in 1992 and I was born in 1998, then who the hell was I? My birth certificate said otherwise. My parents never mentioned adoption. There was no Emily in our family tree. But I couldn't ignore the truth staring back from those photos. That night, I went into my basement with a flashlight. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint metallic scent of old pipes. I traced the scratches on the wall with my fingers, feeling the grooves, the way they dug deep into the concrete like someone had been desperate. In the far corner, where the light barely reached, I noticed a section of the wall that looked newer, the concrete a different shade. I knocked on it, and the sound was hollow. My chest tightened. There was something behind that wall. The hollow thud of my knuckles against that patch of concrete sent a tremor up my spine. I kept knocking, lightly at first, then harder, listening to the sound change. Everything around it was solid, but that section had a muffled echo like it was hiding something. I set the flashlight down so it pointed at the spot and pressed my palm against the surface. It was colder than the rest of the wall, almost unnaturally so. My skin prickled, and I realized I was holding my breath. I didn't have tools, but I had an old hammer in the garage. When I brought it back, my hands were already shaking, and the basement felt different, like I wasn't alone. I told myself it was paranoia, just the weight of knowing too much, but my neck stayed tense, expecting a hand to land on my shoulder at any second. The first strike sent a small crack racing across the surface. Dust filled the air, the smell of dry cement mixing with something older, staler, like the scent you get when you open a box that's been sealed for decades. After several hits, a piece broke loose and clattered to the ground. I leaned closer, squinting through the gap. My flashlight beam slid into a narrow, dark space beyond. It wasn't empty. There was a small wooden chair inside, facing the wall. The wood was rotted in spots, but I could still see the pale outline of rope marks carved into the arms. A thin chain dangled from the backrest. Beneath the chair was a crumpled scrap of fabric. I reached in, my fingertips brushing against it, and pulled it out. It was a faded piece of a red dress. The material was brittle, like it would tear apart if I gripped too hard. I didn't want to keep looking. Every cell in my body screamed at me to stop. But I couldn't. Not when my own life might be tied to whatever was inside. The space behind the wall extended farther back than I expected. The floor was scattered with things. Buttons, scraps of paper, a cracked porcelain doll missing one eye. And then I saw it. A small metal box, rusted shut, tucked against the far corner. I pulled it out through the gap, coughing as more dust swirled up. It was heavier than I thought, and when I shook it lightly, something inside shifted with a dull clink. I pried it open with the hammer claw, the metal squealing in protest. Inside was a stack of Polaroids tied with fraying string. I untied them, and the first one made my stomach twist so violently I thought I might throw up. It was me, or Emily, sitting in that exact same wooden chair, hands bound, eyes wide. And the second photo was worse, because in it, Robert Heller wasn't just standing behind her. He was holding a newborn baby. I stared at the photograph for what felt like hours, my eyes locked on the baby in Robert Heller's arms. The lighting was dim, but I could make out the pale fuzz of hair, the wrinkled newborn skin, the tiny hand curled against his shirt. There was no caption, no date, but something in my gut told me the truth before my mind could form the words. That baby wasn't just anyone. It was me. The next photos confirmed it. Frames of Robert in the same dingy basement space, feeding the baby from a bottle, changing blankets, holding me as though I belonged to him. In some, the red dress scrap could be seen in the background, draped over the chair like a trophy. And then, further down the stack, I saw Emily again. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks hollow, her eyes vacant in a way I can't unsee. In one photo, she's holding me. Her hands are trembling so badly the picture is blurry, but her gaze, it's locked directly into the lens, wide and pleading. I had to stop flipping through them. My hands were shaking too violently. The bottom of the box held other things, birth certificates, though none of them were mine. They belonged to different children, some with faces I didn't recognize, some with names I'd never heard. A few had deceased stamped in red across them. Tucked beneath those was an old cassette tape, the label worn to nothing. Against my better judgment, I took it upstairs, dug an old player out of storage, and pressed play. At first, just static. Then a woman's voice, hoarse, terrified, spoke. "If anyone finds this, my name is Emily Carson. He's keeping me here. He took my daughter. I don't know where she is now, but he said he'd make her forget me. Please, please, someone, if this is still here." The tape cut off mid-sentence. I sat there, the player whirring softly, my entire body numb. My birth certificate might say 1998, but I knew now it was a lie. I wasn't born in my family. I was taken from hers. Robert Heller had stolen me, and somehow, my parents had ended up with me. The worst part wasn't even wondering if they knew. It was the sudden, gnawing realization that the basement where I'd just been, it was ours. That hidden room hadn't always been hidden. It had been waiting. And now I wasn't sure if the real danger had ended with Robert's death, or if it had only just begun. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo of Emily holding me. Her trembling hands, her hollow cheeks, that desperate stare into the camera, as if she knew it might be her only message to the outside world. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. But I also knew I couldn't just go to the police with a box of old photos and a gut feeling. They'd need proof, timelines, documents. Something concrete to prove who I really was and what had happened to Emily. So I started digging. The first thread unraveled faster than I expected. My parents move into this house. I'd always thought we bought it from a random seller, but property records showed otherwise. Before my parents, it had belonged to an R. Heller. The sale date? 2 months after Robert Heller's death. That meant my parents had bought the house directly from his estate. The second thread was stranger. My birth certificate looked normal, but when I requested a certified copy from the county clerk, the file they sent back wasn't identical. The handwriting was different. The registrar's name didn't match. One of them was fake. The third thread broke something in me. I found an old news article from 1999 about Robert Heller being questioned in connection to another missing person. Not a child this time, but a young woman. The name was unfamiliar, but the photo made me choke on my own breath. It was my mother, or at least the woman I'd always believed was my mother. In the photo, she was younger, maybe 20, with longer hair and sharper features. The article said she'd been reported missing by her family, only to resurface 2 years later, claiming she had left voluntarily and cut ties. No follow-up, no explanation, just dropped. The realization hit me like ice water. My mother had been connected to Robert Heller before she ever had me. Had she been a victim too? Had she escaped? Or had she been something else entirely? That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I drove aimlessly until I ended up in the old neighborhood from my earliest memories. The one with the wide street and Robert's porch across from ours. I parked outside what I thought had been his old place before he moved. The house was dark and empty, but something in the upstairs window made me freeze. It was just a shadow, faint and quick, but it moved in a way that made my instincts flare. I realized then that maybe Robert Heller's death hadn't buried everything. Somebody else was still watching me. By morning, I was done circling the truth. I couldn't live another day pretending my life was what I'd always thought it was. I waited until my father left for work, then found my mother in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was any other Saturday. My hands were trembling so badly I had to grip the chair before I sat. I didn't ease into it. I told her I knew about the house's previous owner, about Robert Heller, about the fake birth certificate, about the photos in the basement. I expected her to deny it, to laugh, to brush me off, to call me paranoid. But instead, she set down her cup so slowly it didn't even clink against the saucer. Her hand stayed folded on the table for a long, heavy moment. Then she said, "I was never supposed to tell you." Her voice was flat, but there was something fragile in it, like a sheet of glass under too much weight. She told me she had met Robert when she was 19. She'd been living with roommates, struggling to pay rent, and he offered her a place to stay. At first, he was charming, even protective. Then the rules started. No leaving the house without him. No friends. No phone calls. By the time she realized she was trapped, it was too late. 2 years passed before she escaped, though escape wasn't the word she used. She said Robert let her leave, but only under one condition. She would take something with her. That something was me. I felt my stomach flip. She said she didn't know where I'd come from, only that I wasn't hers. He told her I was better off with her and that if she didn't take me, bad things would happen. She claimed she never asked questions because she was afraid of the answers. But then she looked me dead in the eyes and said the part that made my skin crawl. He told me one day, "Someone might come looking for you. And if they did, you'd have to decide if you were safer with them or with me." I couldn't speak. My thoughts were loud and tangled, but no words would come out. Before I could push further, she reached across the table and gripped my hand. Her nails dug in just enough to make me flinch. "If you've been looking into him," she whispered, "stop. He's gone, but the people he worked with aren't." She didn't explain. She just stood, left her coffee untouched, and walked out of the kitchen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if my mother was protecting me or protecting herself. That night, I kept every light in my room on. It didn't make me feel safer, but the dark felt like an invitation. Around midnight, I heard it, the soft crunch of gravel outside my window. Not the quick steps of someone walking past, but the slow, deliberate pacing of someone who wanted to be heard. I froze. My room overlooked the side of the house, where the only thing out there was the narrow strip of grass and the driveway. The sound stopped. A moment later, something tapped against the glass. Once. Twice. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My eyes flicked toward the window, just in time to see a slip of paper pressed against it from the outside. It stayed there for only a second before vanishing into the darkness. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and slowly slid the window open. There, wedged between the glass and the frame, was a folded piece of paper. My fingers felt numb as I unfolded it. 5 words, written in sharp block letters. "Stop digging or you're next." No name, no signature, but underneath the message, a symbol, a simple circle with a line running through it, like a crude compass. I didn't know what it meant, but deep down, I knew it wasn't random. By the time I worked up the courage to look outside again, the street was empty. I didn't call the police. I knew exactly how it would go. They'd ask who I thought did it, I'd mention Robert Heller, and they'd dismiss me as some paranoid girl obsessed with an old case. Instead, I stuffed the note into the box with the photos and documents. I wasn't ready to give up, but I needed to be smarter. Only, smarter didn't matter, because the next morning, I found the same circle and line symbol scratched into the hood of my car. I didn't drive my car that day. I couldn't even bring myself to touch it. The carved symbol glared at me every time I looked out the window, like it was mocking me. I started searching online, circle with line through it, compass symbol, occult markings. Most results were useless. Random forums, conspiracy theories, street gang tags from cities I'd never been to. Then, buried on page 6 of a search, I found something. It was an archived news article from 15 years ago about an FBI raid on a rural property in another state. The photo attached showed the outside of a barn, its door painted with the exact same symbol. The article was vague, claiming that law enforcement dismantled the suspected trafficking network and that several minors were recovered from the premises. No names, no arrests listed, just the symbol and the note that the group was called the Meridian. That name sat heavy in my mind. It felt wrong in my mouth when I whispered it. I searched deeper. A few old message boards talked about the Meridian like they were a ghost story, a traveling operation that never stayed in one place long, moving kids through a network of safe houses, using the symbol as a way to mark locations or members. One comment, from over a decade ago, claimed that the Meridian never lost anyone, and if they did, they brought them home. I couldn't stop thinking about what my mother had said, that Robert told her someone might come looking for me one day. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I noticed the newest post in one of those forums. It was just a single image, the symbol, and underneath it, a caption, "She belongs to US." No username, no timestamp, just those 4 words. I slammed my laptop shut, but it was too late. The message wasn't meant for the public. It was meant for me, because an hour later, when I went to lock the front door, I saw it. The same symbol, drawn in fresh black marker, right across the welcome mat. The voice's warning echoed in my mind, fueling both fear and determination. I couldn't let them control me anymore. I found a small motel on the outskirts of a town miles from my home. The anonymity felt thin, but it was better than nothing. I kept the box of photos and the tape close like a lifeline. The next morning, I reached out to the private investigator I had contacted weeks ago when I first started digging. I sent him everything, photos, letters, symbols, explaining as much as I could. His reply came quickly. "There's more to this than you think. The Meridian isn't just some urban legend. It's a network that's been operating for decades. Your case, it's tied to the biggest trafficking ring we've ever seen." He promised to dig deeper, to connect me with people who might help. But the truth was clear. I was no longer just a victim of my past. I had to become my own protector. That night, I started documenting everything, every noise, every shadow, every strange call or message. I recorded my thoughts, my fears, and my plans. For the first time, I realized that to survive, I needed to fight back. Months passed like a blur of fear and resolve. The private investigator's contacts led me to a network of survivors, people who had escaped the Meridian's grasp and were now fighting to dismantle it. Their stories echoed mine, each one a thread in a tapestry of pain and courage. Together, we planned. I shared everything I knew, the photos, the basement, the symbols, my mother's story. They believed me, and they believed I could help bring down the operation that had stolen my identity and my childhood. One night, a raid was planned on a compound linked to the Meridian. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to be there. The raid was chaotic. Sirens blared, people screamed, and shadows scattered into the night. For the first time, I saw the faces of those who had been trapped, children, teenagers, women, finally free. Afterward, I stood outside the wreckage, the cool night air filling my lungs. I felt a strange mix of sorrow and hope. My past had been stolen, but my future was finally mine to write. I knew the scars would never fully heal. The memories, the losses, they would always be part of me. But I was no longer just a victim. I was a survivor, and now I was free,